Our next item, our first item after the public comment is a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Andrew.
Andrew, is there a second?
Second, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, all those in, let's see, in favor. Krista, are you on? Are you in favor of?
I'm here and I am.
Okay, Sarah McLean.
Yes.
Okay, Kristen Blanchette. Not seeing her. Rob Backlund.
In favor.
Thank you. Dave Sharp.
Yes.
Okay. Kevin Hansen.
Yes.
Thank you. Steve Rooney.
Yes.
Thank you. Caleb.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Thank you. Liz. I'm not seeing Liz here yet. Sarah LaPearl. Nope, she's not here yet either. And Annie Denny, I did see her.
Yes.
All right. So we have 1, 2, 3, 9 in favor, so the motion carries. Okay. All right. Our next agenda item is Executive Limitations Monitoring Report, an action item to accept the monitoring report for 2.4 financial planning and budgeting. Is there someone willing to make that motion?
So moved, Krista.
Thank you.
I'll second, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Any discussion?
Don, I had a question.
Sure. Krista?
So I was looking at the capital improvement plan, and I was just wondering if there were a couple of things I thought might be helpful to add to that document. I was wondering if we could include when the plan was last updated at the top. And I was also wondering, so we have the expenses for each year for each building, but I wondered if it would be helpful to have a total of those expenses and a final column at the end. So for example, over 5 years, we can see what the total anticipated expenses might be for each building over that time period. And then the last thing I was wondering about is if we could also include square footage of those buildings. And all of my questions or suggestions go to the idea that, you know, as we're thinking about our long-term facilities plan, having some more context to this document seems like it would be really helpful.
Kevin?
Coupled with that, there is historical information on that document too, which sort of makes it confusing to read. But if we are truly looking at a look ahead document in consideration of a lot of what Krista just said, we really need to get crisp on what the significance is of having that historical information in that document.
Steve Rooney?
I think I brought this up last time the plan was presented as well. Sometimes it's difficult to tell whether the money that's in a past year was spent, or if that was what we were hoping to spend. So just a little bit of a cross check on whether that money was actually spent, or whether it would cost more than we budgeted, or
Kevin?
Again, anything after the current year is historical, and it just gets to be, in my opinion, it's not information. If it didn't get spent in a previous year, it should either be rolled ahead, or if the need is no longer there, dropped.
I'm not seeing any other questions. There are a couple of mics open, so if you're not speaking, would you mute your mic, please? Okay. All right, so I've added the comments to the response form I have here. But if I'm not seeing any more questions, I have a couple of questions for you. So based on the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? If you want to just give me a show of thumbs up. Okay, so I'm marking that as yes. And does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? Thumbs up for a yes. Okay. All right. So no more questions. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring report for 2.4 financial planning and budgeting, and I have noted the comments made on the response sheet. Krista, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Sarah McLean?
Yes.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett, are you here?
Yes.
Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Dave Sharp?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Caleb?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Thank you. Sarah LaPearl?
Yes.
And Annie?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion passed. 12. Okay, that passed. All right. The next item is an update on the financial report, which was included in your packet. Are there any questions for Patrick and Floyd? Dave?
That's essentially what was presented at the annual meeting. Is that correct?
No, I believe this was included in your packet, and it's the current operating status sort of picture. Is that
Okay, thanks.
okay? All right. Going to keep moving along. Our next up is an update from the Hannaford Career Center. It's their budget presentation, and I did see Dana Peterson here.
Good evening, Don.
Good evening.
So I do have a brief presentation. I'm not sure I would need to have access to be able to share my screen. I don't know if that's Patrick or someone else that could do that. And then I will introduce myself and go into the presentation.
And I'll make you co-host, and that should give you permissions to share.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Patrick.
You should have it now. Let me know if you don't.
Yes, that will work. So I'll just introduce myself for anyone who doesn't know me. My name is Dana Peterson, and I am the Superintendent Director at the Hannaford Career Center. This is my fourth year, and this is the second time I think this year that I've come to present to the Mount Abe Unified School District Board regarding budget and the Career Center. So let me open up my presentation, and then let's see. Let me share my screen first. I will share my desktop, and then I'll open my presentation, and we should be good to go. So just let me know if you can see the first slide. Thank you, Don. Okay, so good evening. I've just introduced myself. And tonight's presentation will look at our overall budget and provide a comparison with the FY20 actual expenses and the FY21 adopted budget amounts, as well as the FY22 proposed budget. A little more detail than what I was able to provide you with back in October, but happy to report that our new business manager helped keep us on track, and we are very close to what we were projecting at that point in time. So for the overview, our total proposed budget for FY22 is $3,829,301. And the adopted budget for this current year is $3,864,000. That is a net change downward of $35,450, or just shy of 1%. Our FY20 audit and fund balance information. The total fund balance was approximately $100,000, and we were recommending an allocation to our board for FY22 and beyond of $56,000 for future tax abatement. Our building equipment and reserve fund allocation of $24,000, and a health reserve account of $20,000. That takes us to the full fund balance. We're dealing with significantly smaller amounts than any of our partner schools in terms of fund balances. With respect to the budget, we have broken it down by function and object, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but just to give you an idea, 51.4% of our budget is spent on direct instruction. You can see that in the blue semicircle that is off to your right. Other areas that make up significant apportionments are general administration of 9%, and the business office of just shy of 5%, making up about 14%. Our facilities also constitutes approximately 14% of our operating amounts, and that takes us to approximately 80%, and then smaller amounts are allocated to a variety of other areas by function. If we look at it by object code, we see that salaries represent 58.3% and benefits 19.7%. So that constitutes about 78% of our total operating budget. You can see that in the blue sphere to your right. That represents the largest component of salaries, and then the pink one to the left of that represents benefits. And it should really be no surprise to folks that the Career Center is pretty much on par with most other school spending, which allocates somewhere between 75 and 80% to salaries and benefits for school employees in order to be able to operate. The remaining 22% is broken up into very small buckets in terms of professional development, professional services, some repairs and maintenance. Utilities represents just shy of 3%, and then our supplies just shy of 4.5%. And then we have debt service at just shy of 3.5%. That is paying off a bond that we have on our North Campus facility. With respect to our revenues, we have a fund balance transfer for tax abatement that our school board approved for $28,500. Our transportation reimbursement is approximately $12,000. Interest income is a whopping $500. Our technical center rental income is approximately 11,000. We have some Perkins grant to address our formally agreed upon levels of performance, which is 105,000. That's federal funding. Then we have some salary support from the state, 123,000. We have total budgeted revenues of 280,000, which is 29,000 above FY21. We also have state-based tuition payments of 1.185 million, and then tuition assistance of 476,000. When we take the total budgeted revenues plus state payments and tuition, we have just shy of 2 million of our budget made up with those revenues. We do our estimated tuition assessments after taking all of our revenues and subtracting from the expense budget. The difference is what will be raised for tuition from our member towns as well as any other towns from outside of the area, including Chittenden, Rutland County, even some in Windsor County. And all of those costs are assessed on a 6-semester trailing average. And payment is for students not currently in the Career Center this year. And so what we're announcing for next year is for students that have the 6-semester average, which ends with this year's fall semester. So those numbers are 1.8 million, which is divided by a 6-semester average of FTEs at 128.92. And that brings us to a tuition assessment of $14,630, and that is down just shy of $1,700 from the announced tuition last year. When we do the calculation with the state payment, which we need to report per AOE rules and statutory provisions, that cost, based on the 6-semester FTE average of 128.92, is 9,197. And when we take the total costs and put it together in terms of our FTE costs per FTE at the Career Center, it's projected to be 23,827, which is once again just shy of $1,700. The difference of $8 is based on the calculation for the state-based payment, which actually went up, I think $8 from last year. When we look at cost drivers for our budget and expenses, things that we needed to take into consideration this year, I reported on some of these back in on my October visit. But they've changed a little bit since then. Our HRA, HSA costs, we're budgeting $100,000. That's revised down from $120,000, but we're also using $20,000 of our fund balance to put into our health reserve account so that we have a little bit of a buffer. So that allowed us to be able to reduce those costs as we try to figure out exactly what it's costing us for the health insurance, which is about to change again with the statewide agreement being renegotiated starting in April of this year. Health insurance costs increased by about $50,000. That includes a almost 10% increase on the premiums. I think it's 9.9, same as what Patrick reported earlier in the annual meeting. Our construction technology program will be added to full-time so that we have a second level for our program. That's a very popular program. We have quite a bit of interest in continuing, and we have this year a number of students who are juniors and eligible to be seniors next year in the program. So we're taking on a little bit of cost there. Our building equipment and reserve fund and our contingency and legal fund will be continued at the same level as last year, or this current year, FY21. At 25 and 21,000 respectively. So we have a net increase of $55,000, which we have absorbed into that overall 1% decrease in the budget this year. So the $35,000 in reduction on the spending side also includes absorbing 55,000. So that would be close to $90,000 that we've been able to absorb with a lot of work in our budget for this year. Our program overview and some details. The pre-tech programs were at all-time highs last year for us at the Career Center, and we saw a drop due to COVID. We're expecting to see a resurgence again for next year. Unlike the general education programs, decisions for CTE programs are based on industry demand and AOE approval. Based on our historical data from the Agency of Education, the Hannaford Career Center is in the middle of 3 independent career centers in terms of overall budget spending between Bennington, which is Southwest Career Development Center, and Springfield, River Valley Tech. And for comparison purposes, the Warren's Southwest Career Development Center budget for next year is $4,039,000 for FY22, and that is an FTE cost of $22,307. One other point that I'm kind of proud of, and I think it's worth noting, that last year PAHCC served the second largest number of students statewide after the North Country Career Center, and we served 399 students, individual students. That's not just FTEs or programs. So 399 different students actually participated in our Career Center program, and that was second behind North Country at 441, and just slightly ahead of Essex. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. I'll stop sharing my screen so that people can see hands raised and so forth. If you need me to go back to that presentation, I'll be happy to pull it back up if there's a slide that somebody wants to see. Don, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Anybody would raise their hand? Dave?
Thank you. So that's a pretty skinny budget. Where were you saving money? Have you reduced the staff or closed some programs? Where are your savings?
We went through the budget with a fine-tooth comb. We were able to pull some of the things. We're not changing the staffing structure terribly much, except for adding the one area for programming. We have had some turnover in staff that has resulted in some decreases. We've had some retirements. It's been a really challenging year for us in some degrees because some of our staff have retired mid-year. And we also found some savings, as I noted on there, with respect to the health insurance that we were able to fairly conservatively remove from the budget. We did make up for that on the returns of the health reserve. And what were the other areas? We had some program changes. We were able to benefit from some of the federal funding that will allow us to, as a result of COVID, to be able to make some upgrades. And so that allowed us to remove certain things from the budget that would have normally been scheduled for program improvements, but we were able to do that with other means. We have also received a slight increase in our Perkins allocation, and that has also allowed us to be able to make up for some of that funding. So, yeah, we did a very good job of trying to examine every cost, and we asked everyone in the Career Center, regardless of their role, to look at their areas and departments very carefully and propose something that was not a hardship, but certainly would allow us to be able to realize some savings. And the whole Career Center knew that Addison County in general is struggling with some of the effects of COVID, including unemployment and reduced wages. And we wanted to do the best we could to mitigate those concerns and help our partner schools with their planning and their own budget constraints.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing any more hands.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Unless there's anything else, I'll take my leave, and thanks for inviting me back, and hope to talk to you again in the future.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care. Have a great night. Bye-bye. Oh, Patrick, do I need to return host to you, or can you pull that back?
Let's take a look.
I won't leave just yet.
I think you're set. I think I just took back the co-host permissions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Our next item is under board management and governance, and it was item A. It's actually worded to accept the monitoring report for 3.3 delegation to the superintendent. But I'm going to ask you to for the action to be to postpone this monitoring report to the next regular meeting in March. So if someone is willing to make a motion.
So moved, Andrew.
Andrew? Is there a second?
I'll second. Sarah LaPearl.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, not seeing any hands. Krista, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Sarah McLean?
Yes.
And Kristen Blanchett?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes.
Thank you. Caleb?
Yes.
Thanks. Andrew?
Yes.
Thank you. Liz?
Yes.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yes.
Thank you. Annie?
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. Okay. The next item is item B is an action item to accept the monitoring report for 4.2 board job description. Is there somebody willing to make that motion?
So moved, Krista.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Kevin?
I'm a little disappointed with the rationale for partial compliance with the sentence that starts out the linkage between I think it has to do, I don't have it in front of me, but it has to do with the community or whatever. The comment was some community members feel like they're being talked at by the board. And that seems pretty subjective, and some is not necessarily a whole bunch. I don't know if it's board wide. And then just to be devil's advocate, there are certain people that don't take no for an answer, if you will, either. So I'm a little disappointed in that rationale. I do agree with the partial compliance conclusion, but for a different reason. And that reason is I think the board hasn't effectively reached out to all different levels of the ownership or the constituency, if you will. We have great input from those that want to volunteer it and become active. But as far as seeking out a broad-based opinion, I believe we've got a lot of work to do there.
Anyone else?
To Kevin's point, this is Krista. I wonder if we might always be reporting partial compliance under that lens, which I guess is okay, because then it requires that we, recommit ourselves annually to that work that I think is always going to be our work, which, reaching as diverse a slice of our community, or as many people in the community. I think that engagement work is never really going to be fully done. So I think when you say partial compliance, Dawn, do you have to then say what you're going to do to work toward full compliance?
To work.
So I think if this is a place where we state that, that's ongoing work, I support that.
Okay. Dave?
So I think Kevin's point is a good one. When we did the meetings at Mount Abe's gym, where we had a bunch of community members come in and go through a process with a facilitator, that was more about the strategic plan and goals. But we weren't able to do that this year. Whether we would have had we been able to is another question. But COVID really interfered with our ability to communicate with the public. We were limited to people tuning in on Zoom and making comments under the public comment section, or reading Front Porch Forum. Was pretty much the limit of what we were able to do. And we can always do a better job. I think it's hard to reach the public in many ways, particularly the people who are not tuned in to what's happening in education in their community.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And Dave, I agree with partial compliance for both. The first piece of partial compliance 4.2.1, to Kevin, to your point, I think the lowest common denominator is just allowing people the chance to vote on decisions that are being made or would be made, to engage the most folks. And then the partial compliance on the ends piece, I guess, in thinking about that for either our graduates or as students move through our system, do we have a plan to, whether it's remediation or how do we get back on track, I guess, is my question, with hopefully school being in person full time for all grades, as early as hopefully next fall. I'm just curious how we move past partial with students, that this could be a year over year problem falling out from COVID.
Rob, I'm not following your train of thoughts. You said something about the ends, and I thought we were talking about 4.2, the board's job description. So now I'm confused about your question.
One sec. Let me I got to pull up the monitor report because I have to reference. Sorry, I didn't print it out. So it's the end of Dave's monitoring report. The other partial compliance piece, it talks to the ends. Maybe I'm just interpreting it wrong. I'm still not in the right view here. Got to scroll to get people's heads out of the way. I apologize. Not the linkage one, but assurance of successful organizational performance on ends and executive limitations. Does that speak to, just generally speaking, because I haven't seen this monitor report before because it's my first year, does that speak to like the outcomes for our students meeting their ends?
So, yeah, but in the interpretation, it says, we interpret this to mean that the board is responsible to determine whether the organization is meeting the targets defined through the ends and executive limitations policy. So,
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused then, because
so I think
you know, Dave's part, you know, when I look at what he says here, you know, that this year due to COVID-19 and the complications, in order to return to full compliance this year, we'll expect to see how well our ends are being met with traditional measures as well as some new measures. I guess, are there new measures coming down the pike? I just, and is that our responsibility?
I don't think how it's measured is our responsibility, but I think what we learned through the COVID thing was we primarily had relied on the test results, and when we didn't have those, so then Patrick brought us some more information through the sort of the background picture that we said was okay. So maybe in the future it's a sort of a mix, a peek in and the test results. I guess we'd have to ask Dave what he meant by that last sentence.
So we didn't get an ends monitoring report. We, as a board, if I recall correctly, the superintendent asked for and we approved a means report because we didn't have the data available to provide an ends report. And that's completely understandable. Nevertheless, we didn't get an ends report, and it has. I think as a board, we need a lot of work to do to determine what we mean when we say we want ends. These ends, theoretically, they're measurable, and we don't have really good measures that I know of, and maybe it's just because I'm new and we didn't have an ends report this year, so I don't know what it was in the past. But we don't know how kids are doing with their emotional development. We have test scores, and I think as a board, we need to have a better handle on what we mean when we ask the superintendent to provide ends results to our board. And I would welcome that discussion. It has been particularly concerning to me that in all the talk we have had about our financial difficulties going forward and what we might do as a district, we've talked about buildings and travel plans and transportation, but we haven't talked about ends. We haven't talked about like how are the kids doing in this school, and maybe we should be moving our kids into the schools that are where the kids are doing the best, not the school that has the most classrooms. And maybe that's the same. Maybe it's going to work out to be the same. But I think our focus should be on what the ends are. Are we being successful in educating our students? We were short-circuited because of COVID and our ability to understand that this year. It's basically why I reported partial compliance. You can use different language. But I think we have work to do in the future in terms of being clear about what we mean when we say we want ends, specifically measures that we want to have from our superintendent, and then those conversations ought to be part and parcel of how we determine where we go in the future.
Krista?
Yeah, I just was reading something today that there was testimony at the state, front of the state Senate Education Committee around COVID recovery, response and education recovery. And they laid out, or they heard testimony from the VSBA, the Principals Association, the NEA regarding these guiding principles. And and what that might look like. And it might provide us with an opportunity to frame how we look at our district achievement, with some more concrete principles than we've had or that we've struggled to understand. So I don't know where that will go. And I don't know if anybody here, maybe Caleb has more information about that, but anyway, I think what maybe Dave is I agree that it would be great to have a better handle on how we measure the ends and understanding that. And it may be through this, statewide effort around education recovery that we can have some targets that we can look to next year to see how we're doing in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Liz?
I was thinking about how so many of our initiatives are rolled out district-wide. For instance, in the annual report, we could celebrate outdoor learning at all 5 of our schools, and that's been wonderful and what they've been doing. So since we do have experts on social emotional learning and I thought that we had a presentation by them one time, that person may be able to come in and say, because think about how personal that information is to students about how they're doing. So it's kind of hard to think about how you'd quantify that. But since we do have the district-wide initiatives, maybe somebody could come in and just talk to us about what the schools are, what's been going on across schools to support students during this time.
Thank you, Liz. Any other questions? Kevin?
So I agree that, and it's almost a retreat sort of thing, that we need to really grapple with the ends policy. It's kind of a Hail Mary pass sort of situation right now. It does bother me, and I go back to the Brown Dog series, whatever the proper name of those modules were, where they laid out not only an ends policy that is probably at a proper level, like ours very well could be, but there's a lot of tactical requirements or objectives, if you will, basing progress towards that ends policy. I am a little concerned. The last time we talked about the end policy, it seemed to me like we were just going on a data dive into the weeds, and that certainly is not where we should go. But there is, I think there's a little bit more meat we could put on the bones, if you will, with respect to the ends policy, to really start understanding the level of progress.
Steve Rooney?
And I think one other thing that, Patrick has mentioned he wasn't able to really make a lot of progress on this year was the strategic plan, which has a lot of this information in it. I mean, executing a lot of the steps that they were anticipating working hard on this year and next year in this sort of 5-year span, I think was going to provide us with a lot more of the information we're talking about.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. So I have a couple of questions for you. Based on the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation is reasonable? Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you got? Okay. Yep. All right. Great. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? Yes or no? All right. Thank you. Okay. So, although, let's see. So the motion is to accept the monitoring report for 4.2 board job description. Krista, how do you vote?
So you've noted all the suggestions and
Yep.
all that stuff. Okay, then I vote yes.
Okay. Sarah McLean?
Yes.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett?
Yes.
Thank you. Rob?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Thank you. Caleb?
Yes.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yes.
Thank you. Liz?
Yes.
Thank you. Sarah? LaPerle?
Yes.
Thank you. And Annie?
Yes.
Thank you. So the motion passed. Okay. All right. Then the next item is an action item to adopt the proposed proposal request process, and that arrived under separate cover. So we have a motion and then we can discuss, and yeah, if you decide you want to change something, we can work through it then. So
So moved. Krista?
thank you.
I'll second Andrew.
Thank you. Discussion. Sarah McLean.
I have a question with how the proposed timeline correlates with work that we might be doing with a consultant, and if that is going to be along the same track as this proposed process is looking. And if I understand there's been some dialogue between at least one community group, and Don, I think you as chair, about a proposal that's been wanting to be presented, and I'm wondering if there's been any collaboration in building this document with that community group or other community groups, so that we know that we're on the same track or understanding each other.
So this document that was presented was worked on by Patrick and I, and then I sent it out to Krista and Kevin to sort of review. And what happened in the course of us reviewing it was it stirred up an interesting conversation, all of which we thought was better to have back at the board. So we left it as it originally was started, so that the board could have this discussion amongst themselves, because we found it sort of eye-opening, I think, when we started talking about it, the things that came up.
And then
So
as far as the process and timeline with the potential consultant that we discussed at the February facility-specific meeting, did that come up in your discussion, or where does that fit in?
I can speak to that a little bit. So I'm still waiting for the actual proposal from the DMG. I have gotten confirmation that they feel confident that they'll be able to support us in the way that I mentioned that I think would benefit the board at the cost that I thought we were targeting. So that sort of middle ground between their most involved and least involved kind of analysis and study. For me, so I recommended this timeline, which is certainly something that can be adjusted significantly or thrown all out and start over with, but wanting to recognize that if the board's making an announcement effectively today or tomorrow that it wants to hear proposals from the community, we have to assume there are going to be some people for whom that's a new concept, and we need to give time for people to put together proposals so that everyone has an opportunity to do so if they're interested. That's really what prompted that early May timeline, to allow people that window of opportunity to put it together. And I think I'll have to get confirmation once I get more details from DMG, but I think that timeline works within the window that they would be consulting for us as well. Part of the thinking was it seemed beneficial to the board to be receiving proposals at the same time, to understand them and consider what to do with them, rather than having them kind of come in dribs and drabs.
okay. Dave Sharp?
Thank you. So I have a number of questions. One is DMG consulting with the board or with the administration? If it's with the board, then I think it's incumbent upon us to uh, take the time to put together questions or thoughts about what we want from them. And so that's one train of thought or question I had. The other is I think that there's a group in Lincoln that is nearly ready to go. And rather than trying to hear like 6 proposals in May, why don't we? Yes, we should go ahead with a request for proposal that's being proposed. But if there's a group ready to go, let's get them in and hear from them. And then the third question that I have is sort of triggered by what Kevin said earlier about reaching people that aren't, in tune with us all the time. Is there a way, rather than just putting out this request for proposal, is there a way we can reach out to people in the community and invite them in to have a discussion about where we go in the future? I'm pretty vague about that idea, but I think just putting out an RFP isn't necessarily going to get as many proposals as we might like to see.
Dave, are you expecting answers right this minute, or are you just voicing your concerns?
No, I'm not expecting answers right this minute.
Okay.
If someone has them, that's great.
Rob?
Yeah, thank you. Just looking at this document, I guess I don't quite understand. I get page 2, sort of like the bingo sheet there, with the different schools. Some of that stuff would that be filled in? Because or would the general public or people who want to put forth a proposal have to reach out to either the board or the administration to get some of those, I guess, some of those answers, or do their own research? I guess that I just don't quite get it. I would need, if I was to fill it out, I need a little help walking through it, I guess. I really like, I don't know if Dawn, if that was you and Kevin and Krista that put together that values worksheet, that has been a link at some point. When you scroll down and we look at the community values, and we have that scale, negative, positive, and stuff like that. I actually find that values worksheet, I don't remember all the different labels at the top, but they included, was it community input? Was it research-based input? Was it, looking at each value? I think if we could maybe add that to the mix somehow of this proposal worksheet, I think that would be valuable. I have a question about what long-term truly means in this whole process. Are we just talking about, FY26? Are we thinking FY40? I know there's a lot of projections and assumptions that go out that far, but what is a strong long-term? Are there links to include? Would it be, obviously maybe Patrick's proposal or the spreadsheets that Patrick has shared regarding, different numbers that we've had. And then I guess on the back end, like what's the rubric that the board members are going to be using to identify proposals we might want to get a presentation for? I guess those are all the big picture questions that I have at the moment. And other thoughts I have might be more fitting for the early March meeting than this document specifically. So thank you.
Okay, Sarah McLean.
Yeah, and just speaking to this list of guiding principles and priorities in the document, is it financially and legally viable is a question. We have not gone into executive session with our council, which has been advised, and I think it's going to happen in March, to discuss the legal viability of Patrick's recommendation. I think that's what's going to happen. And financial records, are all of those accessible to the community groups that want to create and present a proposal? And then just speaking to this, I mean, we're asking our community to create a proposal at the level of Patrick's recommendation. He has obviously a lot more expertise, real knowledge, experience to make a proposal. And it seems like a tricky process to ask the community to be able to grapple with the nuances and the complexities on their own and to create a full proposal. I mean, even Patrick's proposal couldn't tell us if it was legally viable that we received on December 7th. So it seems like to put all of that burden, we do need to receive proposals. I would love to see proposals from our community. And but I'm just not sure that it's possible to do that, even if the deadline is May, and then from May for the board to digest however many proposals are received, including the consultant's perspective, and then have a recommendation by August. It seems like a big ask.
Okay, Krista.
Yeah, to Sarah's point, I think that's something that I was struggling with when John was asking for my feedback. I was trying to get my head around first how we got to this RFP process, building an RFP. And what I think I understand is that there's some folks that are really interested in asking the board to consider alternatives and have some ideas they'd like to share with us. And then in order to afford that same opportunity to the public, we wanted to have some framework around what that would look like. But I do share the same concerns that in trying to develop that framework, where we're asking folks to provide a level of information that we can't really expect them to have access to. And so then I'm kind of wondering, well, would it be more valuable to hear from folks what it is they would like us to reconsider or look more closely at, and give some reason as to why, versus a really robust proposal, because I'm just not sure that people can deliver that. And I think we have a really great opportunity right now to be open to and invite others beyond this group to really grapple with these issues. And I just want to make sure we set up a process that isn't going to end up really frustrating people and feeling like they're not able to deliver, therefore they're not going to be able to participate in the process. And I also wonder, and maybe this is something we could do during public comment, so the board can discuss this more first, but maybe we could even ask some of the folks that are here tonight from Lincoln that, what is your hope for sharing your ideas with us, and what does that look like? Again, I just want us to be successful in this opportunity and to not create a situation where folks are just going to be more frustrated and feeling like they have less access to being part of this process. The other thing I wanted to say is that, to what Dave was talking about earlier, I wonder if there's a way, whatever this idea generating or proposal generating process looks like, when we get to the selection of what we might want to explore further, I wonder if that's a place where we could invite people to be have a more active role. So we talked about this a little bit with Sue McCormick as well, and she offered this model that we might consider where, you know, recognizing this is a board decision and we need to take responsibility for that, but the board can invite others into that decision making. You know, she had this idea that she shared of creating 4 diverse pods where we'd have about 9 people in each group, and there'd be board members in every group, maybe some staff members, some students, a community member, and each pod would be grappling with the same group of proposals or the same issues, and then they would present their findings or their recommendation to the whole. And so I think the benefit of that is it brings in some fresh voices. It gives people an opportunity to consider the proposals with a diverse group of stakeholders, but it still places the ultimate responsibility with the board. So I don't know, I'm talking a lot and I'm kind of all over the place because it's such a complex issue, but those are some of my thoughts.
Okay, Dave Sharp.
Thanks. So that's a really good idea, Krista, to have pods of people, diverse, looking through various ideas. What I was thinking and why I put my hand up is that I guess one of the things that I'm hoping for is that the last consultant that we had really looked at demographics and buildings. And I expressed this earlier in the evening, is that I'd like to look at this in terms of results with kids. What's best for kids, and so my hope with DMG, because they're really focused on educating children, and so maybe what we do is we get some of these sort of outlines of proposals from people who don't have access to a lot of data, and ask DMG to look at those proposals and flesh them out for board consideration.
Okay, Liz.
I also wanted, I think that makes sense, Dave and Krista. I think those sound like a good way to pursue it. And I also wanted to notice that the plan that we have that we're for repurposing, at the end, it also did say alternative options, right? So one of the alternatives, I'd have to look at it again, but was closure was one of the options. So it's not just even the plan with the recommendation that we are talking about for repurposing is more complex than that and has alternatives to consider. So maybe the DMG could help us think about, tweaking that or different changes and different ways that we could look at it, and how to kind of adjust it to what we hear, from the proposals that might come forward. So I think that deserves also some more attention as well.
I do see your hand, Paul, but I want to give board members a chance to weigh in first. Steve Rooney?
Yeah, I think the proposal format doesn't need to be, like something an architect or a construction firm would have to respond to, where it's right down to the nickel and dime. I think we're looking to generate new ideas and hear people out. And I think just saying, here's the process, please consider these things in your proposal and give us as much information as you think you're comfortable with, and we can put them all on a table and sort out the ones that look like they're really off in left field someplace from the ones that look like it's an idea that we hadn't considered before, and then let Patrick or DMG or somebody else with a little more horsepower dive into those.
Kristen Blanchett.
Yeah, I mean, I think, could it be sort of a more casual thing like Steve talked about, and maybe even some students would want to take a crack at it or something? I mean, that would be valid too. So I don't think it needs to be this scary thing. Even if someone wants to just share a few ideas and doesn't have a complete plan, is that valid, something that can happen? Or does it have to be a giant fleshed out thing?
Okay, thank you. And then Kevin Hansen.
So I'm the one that's made this more complicated through some of the back channel discussions. Of course, I come from a world where if you don't say it, it just leaves a whole large interpretation by whoever. So the stakes are high here. We are looking at coming up with the best plan to improve student outcomes in the district. And so anybody that wants to play the game needs to be prepared to consider those high stakes, if you will. I ended up I've recently, since in the last day or so, I thought this is really a two-phased approach thing, where there is a solicitation for proposals, if you will, that can have a rather loose structure with maybe some understanding of cost with that bingo sheet for whatever it was called, and going through some of the values, and that would give the board enough information to make some evaluations. I strongly disagree that the board should be interpreting and filling in the blanks for these proposals and making assumptions that may or may not have been the intent of the proposer. I would recommend, if we go with this structure, that we put a text box with each one of those values, so that there can be a verbalization, if you will, for the rationale, as opposed to just circling something from -10 to +10. I would also recommend that we shorten up the timeline for that, because the intention would be to draw out a variety of proposals with some level of completeness, and that's all subjective, I suppose. And then turn around and then start having successful proposals, if you will, develop a more granular approach. And my concept is you take a lot of the tables and charts and numbers out of Patrick's proposal and just format them into a menu of options or whatever that people could pick and choose and understand where things are going. But as the whole process goes to a presentation to the board, I feel that the presenters should be yeah, I mean, some of these same potential presenters have complained about the lack of detail in Patrick's, by the way, but I think there should be a level of detail approaching that's comparable to what the administration's proposal is. Maybe we don't get there, but we should certainly try. And through this whole process, whether you're putting together a preliminary proposal for review, or you're going to fine tune a proposal for a presentation, that whole exercise, it may not be easy, but it's important for the presenter or the group of presenters to go through that whole thought process to understand the validity, completeness, the direction that their proposal is taking, and making sure that they've thought it out to such a level that there's something there for the board to consider. So I'm, again, I mean, I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to oversimplify this thing. I certainly don't want to go back and make it so easy that everybody's going to come back with every single concept that we've gone through over the last 2 years either, you know. So I think we need to, I think we need to frame this a little bit, and I think we have the responsibility to frame this a little bit so that, number one, I mean, we get what we're looking for, but also it's not fair to people proposing this stuff not to have an understanding or concept of what's going to make it, or what's going to be considered valuable from our perspective and what's not.
Thank you, Kevin. Sarah LaPearl.
My comment goes back a little bit, but to the groups maybe looking at things, I really think we're missing the kid perspective. We need to be doing all of this, and everybody needs to have that as also outcomes for kids. And even my own two children have such, their thoughts all the time that I'm like listening to. One of them's like, this is, going to Mount Abe was unbelievable, even though it's cut in half. Like, I get to see all these people. And then I have another kid that's like, are there kids on your board, Mom? Do they know what it's like to have seen like a school, or have had like suddenly be really isolated and have way less kids and in that situation? And I'm like, I don't know if everybody on the board knows that, like that. And when kids get excited about stuff, and I want to make sure presentation or whatever this is, approval process, or all of our next steps bring a lot of different kids to the table. So I would like to advocate for the inclusion of their voice. And a lot of times also people, they're making decisions that are about their relationships as adults. And we really have to put these thoughts in the front, these kids' like futures and thoughts, and social and academic and all the others.
Speaking of our kids, I see Hannah's hand up.
Yeah, hi. I was just gonna add to what Sarah was saying. I think it's really important that we get student input besides me and Bella too, because this impacts a lot of kids' futures, and whichever way it goes, it's gonna impact my brother, and it's gonna impact people that come after me, and probably not me because I'm graduating in 24. But however this turns out, there's gonna be an impact. And so I think it's really important that we get all kinds of student input, because I had a really positive experience going to Bristol, and I have had a really positive experience going to Mount Abe, and I feel like we should hear from like a bunch of kids from different towns and from Mount Abe, and just like hear about their experiences. Because we heard a little bit. I remember one meeting, a video was submitted, but other than that, I don't feel like we've heard that much. And so I would just echo what Sarah just said about including student input, and it's really valuable, and I'm lucky that I get to be here and listen to these conversations. But I feel like other input would be just as valuable.
Thank you, Hannah. Kristen Blanchett.
Yeah, so Kevin said that we wanted people to present what we're looking for, but I don't know what we're looking for. I mean, we're still processing, I mean, we're still problem solving. And so I don't need one form of input, really. I mean, I would love to hear, like, maybe an 11th grade class would want to put something together to present to us, or a group of, like you said, or a group of parents, and I think that we would marginalize people if we just have this behemoth thing that they have to do to present something to us, to give us information as we're problem solving. So I don't even know what we're looking for. I mean, Lincoln's is probably going to be very intense, and Paul, you've been working on that. I can't wait to see it. That's great. But what if a bunch of 11th graders wanted to do something? And, you know, it wouldn't have to be, we can still take pieces of what people are sharing without it having to be in a certain format, I believe. And, but it would be different than just getting emails, certainly, from people, and just, you know, it would be something presented, even if it's 5 lines on a piece of paper. I think that could be helpful from people, and we can look at it and sort through it, and sort of as individuals, and I think we could manage that.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Andrew Morton.
So a few thoughts after what I've heard from other folks. So I guess what I'm looking for, or I hope that we can see, is proposals that, you know, people want to bring some solutions to the table, that they are as robust and as detailed as possible, at least to the level of what Patrick's was, so that we can have some compare and contrast between what they're proposing and what Patrick's put on the table. And hoping that these folks who bring these proposals forth also have access to the information they would need to bring forward a viable plan. Also because, and I'm just trying to think about what this is going to look like, that so much of these plans also, to me, I would think about means and ends when we think about policy governance, and so much of this is really about means too, even though it's our board decision. A lot of these things I'm not qualified to even evaluate because I don't have any expertise in running the educational system. I'm just an elected official. So, you know, one of the things I'm probably going to be curious about is Patrick's take on a plan. Like, does this seem viable? What's this look like from a management day-to-day operation standpoint? And just thinking about what that might look like and how people might respond to that if Patrick's saying, well, I'm not sure that this is really going to work well. The perception that we're just sort of asking for people's opinions and then putting it in the recycling bin, because I don't want folks to have that idea. So I'm just thinking about the plan needing to be specific enough so that if we ask Patrick questions about it, he can have a plan in front of him that seems reasonably detailed enough that he can have an opinion on it. And I'm also wondering, I think as Dave was mentioning, about if we're going to have DMG hired to evaluate Patrick's plan, that whatever we sort of put forth maybe as the counter plan is also evaluated by a third party as well. So that we sort of just check in all the boxes. We've had a third party give us an opinion as well. So those are a few thoughts I have.
Okay, and Rob.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I agree with a lot that's been said. In regards to Kristen, I think your point, you know, equity is not necessarily equal. Like I don't expect plans to equal maybe the detail that Patrick's have. I don't think that's equitable for our community members. I would love, you know, in just thinking about this process moving forward, not necessarily this document that was on the agenda, you know, just a couple like listening tours, opportunities to hear directly from students, hear directly from community members, and then also to hear directly from our staff. Like we just sit back and listen and hear what folks have to say. I think good things come from that, moving forward with our decisions. And then, yeah, just another thought that lost what I had written down. Yeah, I think it would be great if there is a proposal put forward that we also have, like Andrew said, the DMD really take a look at it and bounce it back. Also, I think we should, but if we go forth with a professional third-party consultant, I think we should have at least 2 options looked at than just one, personally. So.
Thank you, Rob. Andrew, is your hand still up from before, or do you have another question? Okay. Kevin?
Backing up to Kristen's comment on my comment, I probably didn't say half of what I really meant or intended to, but I think, I think we as a board should have things that we're looking for. We should be looking for improved student outcomes. We should be looking at closing educational gaps and performances of low and high performance students. We should be looking for an option that's going to fold in and be consistent with what the financial projections are. We should be looking for an option that's going to, involve a whole bunch of bonding money to renovate buildings for whatever reason, to do whatever. I don't know, whatever, but I mean, we do have things we should be looking for. And then the other thing is the more comparable we can get people to submit is it. I'm not sure I can get this out right, but the more consistent we can get people to submit to a certain set of parameters, if you will draw out the advantages of these various proposals. So, like I said, kind of in a nutshell before, I'm concerned that we're going to go backwards on this, and we've got high stakes, we've got student outcomes that we should be focusing on, and we should be kicking this process up a notch and moving forward.
Sarah LaPearl.
I agree on making sure that we have these like strong proposals that we can actually compare. What I like about all of this is that it's very positive. It's more creative. It's more problem solving. And, some people's proposals might be tweaks to this original proposal, or adjustments that might be more pleasing. And so for certain groups of people. So I just, that's what I like about it. And that's why I think we should do it, and make sure that we have done something that's positive instead of, it has felt very like blocking negative. And this, I think, feels very positive and creative and problem solving.
So, any board members we haven't heard from? Annie, I haven't heard from you. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm just listening and kind of taking it all in at this point.
Okay. Caleb, how about you?
I think I'm good at this point. Thanks.
Okay. Steve Rooney.
So I mean, one thing we could do is to, basically point to Patrick's presentation. We can point to, that bingo sheet, for lack of a better term, and say, we're encouraging you to provide a proposal that's this robust. We'd like to see it be this robust, and we're going to understand it better, and we're going to be able to compare it better to what we're looking at right now, if it can be at this level. But I'd hate to tell people we're not going to accept them if they're not, with a perfect dots and T's and crosses. Because there might be an idea in there that we might just not have thought about. Even if it's not fully flushed, dovetail into something else we hadn't thought about, and sometimes that's where you get new ideas. So I think we should put an emphasis on getting as much information in these proposals as we can, and making people invest the time to think about what they're doing. But I hate to be discouraging about, just some brainstorming as well.
Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, I was just thinking as the conversation's unfolding, I think it's important to note that, so Floyd and I have had multiple conversations already about, and Floyd's put in multiple hours already, trying to think about how to package information in a way that's accessible to the community. So as they're trying to put together proposals, they have something to work with. Sort of talking conceptually right now, and the reality is there are so many layers to this, but at least at a really high level, as someone's trying to conceptualize a proposal, what's it cost to just operate a building? What's it cost per professional staff member? What's it cost per support staff member? What's it cost per administrator? What are the central services that are necessary and the costs associated with that in terms of sort of operations of a system our size? So that people can have almost the building blocks that can be combined in lots of different ways, and the cost associated with each building block as they put a lot of different iterations of those blocks together to create their recommendation. And the idea is if we keep it kind of like high level and simple and accessible, as people use that and dig deeper in putting a proposal together, they can ask specific questions that we can then peel back some additional layers of information to help them finish that proposal. So we're starting to really wrestle with how to do that. It gets messy and complicated. We're still working through it, but I just think it's important for the board and the community to know we're trying to really create the conditions for people to have at least enough information to get started with a reasonable proposal, and then provide the support we can with additional layers of information as they progress. Because the reality is some people will want to stay high level and others will want to dig deeper. And so we need to try to support to the extent we can those various levels of detail that people want to get into.
Okay, Sarah McLean.
I just kind of wanted to go back to the timing question so that there's not duplicate work going on in our community. So I think there may be value in accepting these proposals or hearing them or reading them or reviewing them on a rolling basis. You know, if we have two community groups that are both really digging into very similar concepts, that just seems like a waste of time for the community and for the board. So I'm just wondering if there would be any, acceptance to receiving the proposals on a rolling basis in a very public forum, on the meetings that the board has set aside for facility specific. That if an organization, group, community, student group, whatever it is, submits within a week of that meeting, that then there's an allotted time for a presentation for the board to consider.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other board members with their hand up. Oh, no. Would board members, Paul has been waiting patiently for us to have a break in ours. Do you have any problem hearing from Paul for a minute and then, okay, Paul.
Thank you. Just a reminder, I'm Paul Forlenza from Lincoln, the select board. So I appreciate the challenge that you have. RFPs are not easy. And there's a trade-off between trying to get specifics so you can have an apples to apples comparison, and also allow for creativity, and that's the balance, and I don't think anybody gets that exactly right. The second thing I would say is it would be very useful to know what the criteria is that you're going to measure these proposals against. So a standard way to do that in an RFP is you might have 10 criteria. You're scoring everything on 100 points. So one criteria might be 5 points and another might be 20. So it's valuable to know whether the criteria are all equal or whether some are weighted heavier than others. I really appreciate, Patrick, your working on and thinking about how to provide the financial data. One of our challenges has been to understand what the, if you will, facts are about right now. And so we would like financial data that's available, and the same financial data should be available to all folks who are going to make a presentation or proposal. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to do apples to apples. Reference was made to the level of detail of Patrick's proposal. I've seen, I think, 3 different documents, so I'd just like to understand exactly which document referring to about that. We in Lincoln, we have not seen, so I'm saying all of this not having seen the document that you're looking at about proposals. And maybe I missed that, or maybe you haven't sent it out yet. But not having looked at that, Lincoln was prepared to present a detailed proposal and make a presentation in April. And I just offer that as sort of a fact, if you will. So I appreciate the challenge that you have, and having done RFPs on both sides, writing them and responding to them, these are not easy things, and you can easily get messed up in much too much detail. On the other hand, you do want the proposals to be apples to apples. So just wanted to share that. Sometimes organizations that are putting out an RFP will ask for people making a proposal, that they intend to make a proposal, and then there's a meeting with that group of people to sort of talk through what some of the questions are, because inevitably when you put out a document asking for specifications, there are questions. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. So, oh, Andrew.
I was just going to comment after Paul's comment, which was if, as we go forward and we're soliciting RFPs to basically have, I don't know where we would put it on our website or whatever, but basically this is Patrick's proposal and here are all the supporting documents that he's using. So folks can look at that as a means of comparison once they put theirs together so that they know what their, what the benchmark is.
Patrick.
I completely agree with that in concept. The supporting documents, you've seen evidence of the supporting documents that make perfect sense to me and perhaps make little sense to almost anyone else. So conceptually to say, here's the proposal and here's all the supporting documents, use that same information and go forth and come up with something better makes sense, but it falls apart pretty quickly when the supporting documents that I actually, and I think I've shown, like I'm open to showing exactly the documents that we're working from, but they get so weedy and that it doesn't make a lot of sense to others. And that's where the work that Floyd and I are engaged in comes in, and talking about how do we lift this to a level that makes sense to everybody, knowing there are many layers, but at least on that big picture layer, how do we lift that information, the actual supporting information that we did lean on, and put it together in a package that is accessible, whereas I would say what we've shared so far is somewhat inaccessible. And we're really trying to figure that out. We met for a bit today, we met for a bit yesterday. We're going to continue to work at this until we have something to put out there, and it may or may not hit the mark, but at least there'll be something, and we can continue to tweak it and evolve it as we hear from people what their needs are or interests are in developing a proposal. So I'd rather go that route than really put out. I can't tell you. In fact, the 22 tab Excel spreadsheet that was shared is a summary of dozens of other spreadsheets that were used to support the information that's in my presentation. So that.
Oh, I'd agree with you, Patrick. I think it needs to be, maybe it's not down to the level of redistribution of pencil erasers from schools to schools, but because too much detail then doesn't give folks a fair chance because they don't know what it's information overload. So I think you're right. Somewhere in the middle where there's building blocks, costs for folks, costs for buildings, they're Legos, they can stack them.
Bingo. And that at least gets you into does it pass the straight face test? Like that's really the litmus test, right? We want people to put together a proposal that at least passes the initial check. Like, yeah, this feels like it could be possible. And then we can dig deeper if there's something that philosophically meets the interest as well as the financial feasibility.
Okay. Now I'm even more uncertain about where we're going right at this moment. So, as board chair, I typically don't put my spin on things because that's not my job. I'm supposed to be representing the entire board and just be the space for people to have that conversation. So the sort of release document was the piece I created, and that second page really was about providing sort of the building blocks that people could use to get to that. The timeline is important for us and anybody giving proposals to know, but the other tool about to assess the options was really a board tool. So, and some of that is kind of overlays in with the priorities so that if people know that we're looking at these priorities when we're going to be sort of judging, will this work or will this not work? We're going to be measuring. And this entire process is similar to a process that is used often when they hire a principal or somebody in the district. And so that's kind of how we came to this together kind of thing. Was I said to Patrick, that process that they use when they're looking for a principal really works because there's a group of people that look over everything and then you sort of give it a ranking and you move along according to your rankings kind of thing. So that's some of the background where this was built, I guess. I can see where we could maybe soften some of the language on it so that people would feel comfortable, presenting some ideas that maybe, and I think maybe Patrick said this somewhere in our conversation, was that, maybe we look at everything and then we start cherry picking things to get to where we want to go kind of thing, or to consider items. So like I said, I'm kind of not sure where we're headed right this moment. Liz?
Can people just use what's relevant to them? So say if it's the 11th graders, that they have an idea and then they could use the values, how you did the scale. I do like the idea of community also using that when they're coming up with an idea. And then, because I mean, it could just be a very small thing, right? Like, so they have an idea and then they can attach it to a value and they can explain how it helps meet that value. So in like a very micro means kind of way, but just to be heard. And That, so maybe if we put all of these out there, the whole everything that you have, and then people can just use the part that's most relevant to them instead of requiring everyone to do all of the pieces.
Patrick, you were unmuted before. Were you going to say something?
I was, and I still can. I think there's a statement that I want to make, even if it's only for my own benefit, but I hope it benefits others. And as we're talking about weighing proposals and mine and alternatives and all of that, I think it's important for me to just let the board know and the community know, strange as it may sound, I'm not wedded to my recommendation. It's my best thinking. My thinking hasn't stopped since I made that recommendation. And I have not yet to date heard a proposal that I think is better in terms of meeting student need than the one I put forward. And I genuinely hope I do. I'm truly hopeful that there's a better idea out there focused on meeting student needs. I think that is important. My bias has to be, always will be, student outcomes. There are a lot of competing interests. When anything bumps up against student outcomes, in my perspective and in my proposal, student outcomes wins. And I feel like that is, I think Kevin has mentioned that, I would hope that's number one priority without a close second to this board as well, because I think that's what people elected you to do. So I just want to put that out there for the board to know, like, I'm super open to different ideas. In particular, thinking about Kevin or Andrew's comments about wanting to hear my thoughts from an operational perspective on these different ideas. I think it's important if I'm going to play that role, and I think it makes some sense for me to do that as a person that's got to make it work, right, at the end. It's important for people to know I want something to be better than what I put out there, because it has its challenges, and I agree with those are challenging things. I also think, it may have been Kevin that said this too, I think the board really does need to have a sense of, what are we looking for? What do we want? I think it's, when Don was talking about the hiring process we use, in particular for building principals, we don't interview every applicant and then decide afterwards what we want. We decide what we want. We measure applications against what we want, and those who we feel are closest to being what we want, matching what we want, we interview. And the finalists for those positions that we think are the closest match are the ones that get we call it the gauntlet day in administration, right? Where you meet with everybody and their brother, and it's a 14-hour day, and you're exhausted at the end, and whoever's left standing gets the job, right? That's sort of the basis for the tool that's here. Is I sort of pulled a few different concepts that I think are different ways that the board or the community have said, this is what we want. So we have the community values, where the community is saying this is what we want, that we have prioritized. We could talk about the different ways to prioritize that. I stayed consistent with what Rob and Krista presented as the priorities as they were looking at the survey analysis. But I also didn't want to lose the ends and the other sort of policy perspectives that are really important to the board. And that's where you see the mission and the multiple different ends, one of which is cost, right? There's no cost aspect in the community values, and yet perhaps the number one thing we heard most clearly in that survey was about cost. So I thought, bringing in some of the ends policy language and the mission of our organization was a place to go. And then I think using a tool that Kevin created, kind of taking that neutral to negative to positive impact on those different values and interests, was a way to at least give a cursory review of submittals to see, do they hit the mark, and knowing that I really wonder if there is a proposal that hits all of the marks exactly right. It's going to hit some really well, and others it's going to miss a bit, because that's the nature of the complexity of our situation. But it's important to know where does it hit and where doesn't it hit as the board's trying to evaluate these things. So that was some of the thinking behind the tool. And there's a lot of different ways we could go with it, but that was the generation of that. And I think the timeline conversations come up too. I think Sarah McLean, you made a great point in terms of the bottleneck that we might experience, and a rolling submittal may make the most sense and may position the board best to be able to weigh the options as they're evolving. So I think that there's some logic to that. I do think we want to be coinciding with our consultant. And I think when we talk about how we work with the consultant, to a degree, the consultant has a say in how they work with us as well, right? So I don't want to be too presumptuous that we can just tell the consultant, every option that we throw before you, we want you to dig deep into and do a full analysis of, unless we're ready to open up the pocketbook to do it, because there's a cost that comes with that. What I've initiated, which can change, but what I've initiated with DMG is the board really wants a full evaluation of my proposal, and they're interested in hearing alternative proposals put forth by DMG. I haven't yet, and there's still room for it. I haven't yet said, and the board will want you to evaluate perhaps multiple other scenarios brought forward by community. So that may change the conversation that we've had so far, and that's okay. But I just want to be upfront with the relationship between the board and or me and our consultant. And I think Dave raised that question before. Who is the consultant working for? To me, it's not an either or. It's not they're working for me or they're working for the board. To me, it's they're working for the community. Like, they are a resource to our community, led by me and the board, to produce information that helps the board and potentially the community make an informed decision about what our future should look like. So, I don't know. Those are all the thoughts I had going on, which is why I unmuted a few seconds ago.
So I'm wondering if tonight, it sounds like a little more, there could be some more work done on the document to release, to get information. It sounds like there could be some changes to that. It also sounds like there could be some changes to the timeline and the board tool. I think we could provide the timeline in a vague way so that people knew that we were, and it would be adjusted, kind of like what the community engagement did. They said, we'll make adjustments along the way, kind of thing. But as far as the releasing for information, I feel like the sooner we can get that out, the better, so that even, say, the Lincoln group can see what we're going to be considering, and they can look back at their work and say, does this cover this? Are we missing anything that we know they're going to be looking for ahead of time? Krista.
Well, I was just wondering if, Patrick, that what you and Floyd are working on, which sounds like it would be really important, at least for the Lincoln group to have, but probably for all groups to have, like what your time frame is for having that set to go. $1 million question.
Floyd would love for me to be able to answer that question, because I don't know, it's we have a conversation and Floyd takes it a direction. He comes back and he says, hey, look what I did. And I said, oh, I don't know about that. And we have another conversation and it takes a different direction. And so it's very much an iterative process right now. So it's hard to say when that will be pinned down, but it's a high priority right now. So we hope to have something, at least something to start. Again, whether it's exactly what it ought to be out of the gate, probably not, but at least to have something that we feel like is a starting point soon. I don't know, maybe we could set Floyd, I'll watch your face to see how realistic this is.
It's not.
End of next week, so a week and a half or so, to continue to try and get this right.
I had another thought for the board to consider. You know, we're talking about an RFP, requesting proposals. And there's nothing that would preclude the board from saying, we want to request information or we want to request qualifications so that you can start to frame in who our possible partners might be. And it also gives you an opportunity to limit what you may be looking at in terms of coming in for proposals. If we develop a really robust request for information that lets our community know this is the information we're looking for in this type of a structure, it may save someone from an awful lot of time that doesn't go anywhere. So just, you know, percolate on that as well, that there's multiple levels of requesting information from our community.
Floyd, if I understand what you're just saying correctly, would that be something like just an announcement? Hey, if you're interested in submitting an idea, a proposal, come to this meeting. And then we have a sense of like, how many people are even interested in this? Maybe there's only 1 or 2 groups, or maybe there are 20. And then to have a conversation about what's your like big picture idea about your proposal. And then if we have 5 people that have the same idea, maybe they collaborate around that concept and we don't have the redundancies that was mentioned earlier. And you know, does that stymie the creativity? Maybe. Maybe it also creates resources for people that are interested in putting together proposals and they can collaborate. I don't know, but it's an interesting idea.
And we could also request qualifications. You know, if you want to be part of this, you know, my 2 brothers are really bright, but they have no standing in this type of a conversation. You know, that it may help to bring the right people to the table, and show the breadth of what we're looking for, so that they understand, those partners or possible partners understand what they may be jumping into.
And it may start with a pitch before a proposal to layer it in.
I mean, back to Patrick's point, or maybe it was Kevin Hansen's point, we've been dancing with this for 18 months. There are people who've been aware of it since December 7th and have no idea all of the work that Krista did with community engagement 2 years ago up until current, that we've already vetted an awful lot of possible scenarios. I don't know. I don't envy you guys. This is, you know, you talk about eating an elephant one bite at a time. You got a crocodile that could bite you at any time while you're trying to eat it one bite at a time.
Krista.
Yeah, I'm wondering, my original question, Patrick, about your additional information framing was, you know, whether if we could have more for the March 9th meeting, as well as some tweaks to this proposal, and it gives folks enough to chew on, so that come April, we might be able to set aside time to allow people to pitch, or maybe we say after that March 9th meeting, we're opening it up, you know, start submitting your proposals, whatever it is, looking at our March 9th meeting as a place where we can have a little bit more info. We've had this great conversation, and then we can decide the best way to move forward. Recognizing it's iterative, it's not perfect, but we're going to try to give people a time frame and a little more info.
Steve, and then Kevin.
Yeah, I like the sort of the qualification stage. That might be kind of the brainstorming free for all. You can let anybody kind of, post an idea, post a thought. You can, the 11th graders can come up with a little something that they'd like to have us consider, and we can wade through those and pick out the ones we think might stand a chance, and then maybe encourage those folks to look at Patrick's database and work through the fine detail and come up with something that's really rounded out. And then we don't waste time later in the process looking at stuff that really doesn't have a bearing.
Okay, and Kevin.
So the conversation was going down a path where we would have a meeting with prospective interested proposal submitters, I guess you could call them, kind of like what Paul had mentioned before, have a pre-proposal meeting with these people and kind of lay out what we want, what they're thinking about, and solidify what the actual requirements are going to be. And that to me seems pretty lucrative. I feel the term qualifications is the wrong term because it could infer limitation. But I think that have an open meeting, and maybe that's our March 9th or whatever, that first meeting in March is the big topic for that meeting, is to entertain a discussion with these different people. And then go on and go through the wide range proposal process and the narrow scope presentation process or something, or maybe it just, I understand let them come as they will, and maybe that's what we do, but I'm concerned that we lose a certain amount of continuity of having the proposals at the same time and developed at the same level, if you will. So that's kind of a pro and a con thing right there.
Okay. So I think probably our best bet right now then is to not adopt the proposal request process tonight. Go back. I can do a little work on the release piece, and then we can reconsider take a look at it in March, at the March 9th meeting, and then maybe then be ready to say, okay, this is the next step, what we're going to do. I think it was really important that we all have this discussion together, because there was no way for us all to hear each other then do this. So right now the motion is to adopt the proposal request process. So I'm going to ask you how you vote. So Krista.
I think I'm voting no, correct? So that we can come back and revisit. Okay.
Yeah, you are
No.
opposed. Sarah McLean.
No.
All right, Kristen Blanchett.
We can't just table.
It will have the same outcome. So Rob.
No.
Okay. Dave.
No.
Kevin.
No.
Steve.
No.
Caleb.
No.
Andrew.
No.
And Liz.
No.
Okay. Sarah LaPearl.
No.
And Annie Denny. I guess we lost her. Okay, so that did not pass. Okay, so we will be back to this next month. All right, our next item up for discussion is another action item, the communication structure and processes.
Can I propose that due to the late hour, we move this to next month also? Because I think it needs a good conversation.
I have a question to ask then. Can we start our next month meeting any earlier than 6 o'clock? Because now that agenda is getting packed full, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through that one without doing the same thing. So we need a little wiggle
Well,
room.
sorry, Don, but we're talking about a regular March board meeting, right? Not our facilities meeting. So our regular March board meeting is already looking really busy, is what you're saying.
Right. Well, I think this communication structure process is necessary. The discussion is necessary because it's going to involve some of the work coming forward in the next month.
Okay.
Getting word out.
Okay.
People. So, and the meeting, the 9th meeting is going to be orientation or reorganization, the survey discussion, the questions, some updates, and then there's a meeting on, help me, Patrick, the 16th.
Yep, we have 3 meetings in a row, the 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd. Those are the 3 March meetings on the calendar.
Yeah. So Steve Rooney.
So Don, correct me if I'm wrong, when I was reading it, it seemed like it's something that we're not proposing a changed plan at the moment. That's kind of the plan that was already formatted.
It is there are some points that I think Krista and I brought up, and then there is the other reason that this was put on was so that we could address the sharing of information out, especially through Front Porch Forum, because we got some more information about the use of Front Porch Forum that we were going to share as well. Is that what you're remembering, Krista?
Yeah, I forgot about the Front Porch Forum part, but you're right, that is a piece of it. But this was developed and we really haven't revisited it during a time when we've been putting out a lot of info that is complex. And so it's brought up some questions, and we wanted to be sure that everybody understood that this was a process we had in place, and also provide a chance for building in more clarity if we needed it, which I think we do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was just thinking that, it seems to be a workable plan at the moment. We are putting out information. We are operating sort of okay by it. I would say it does need some tweaks, but it might be that we could live with it for another month or a month or two.
I'm fine if that's what a majority of you want to do. We can try and squeeze it in, but as the discussions get harder, we still may need to add a little more time to the meetings. Rob.
Is the meeting on the 9th the reorganization, or is that on the 16th? And which one's the facilities and which one's the reorganization?
So I got to look at a calendar. The 9th would have been the facilities meeting, I believe. Yeah, wait. Yes, because the 9th would have been, but we can't have that meeting without reorganizing. So we were going to try to do the reorganization so that we could have that meeting and then deal with the time to talk about the survey, because we needed 2 hours. We were trying to do that. And then we usually have an orientation that has to happen 2 weeks after town meeting. That is written in some of our policy language. So that will have to, then 16th will have to be a part reorientation education piece and whatever else we have to fill in. And then the 23rd is our regular meeting.
So originally the 16th was scheduled as the reorganization and orientation, and then the 23rd was the regular meeting. And then we added the 9th for facilities, which complicated things because you have to reorganize in your meeting following the town meeting day results. So.
And I think that this information would be good for new members to have also. So maybe going over it then. I mean, I agree. It's functional, needs some beefing up for sure. Is there so what did you guys want to share the piece about the front porch forum? Are we not supposed to be using that, or what's the caveat there?
Krista.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most pressing thing is that we have a district account, and that's because we can post to all 5 towns at once. And for the pleasure of that, it costs, I don't remember the exact number, but it's over $1,000.
$1,200.
So 1,200, right? So we were using it more and more because it was a way to push information out to all 5 towns at the same time in a consistent message, the same message to all 5 towns. But it's used for 2 purposes. One is for school related information, Patrick sending it out as the district leader. And then it was also being used for school board information. And so there was concern raised that if it's going out and it has to be assigned to a person's name. And so, the account has to be affiliated with a particular person. And so Patrick seemed like the most reasonable person to have their name associated with it. So there was concern raised that information from the board going out to all towns under Patrick's signature, could lead to assumptions that these were messages coming from Patrick, not from the board.
So I don't get this because I'm an individual school board member and I have an account where I can post to all 5 towns and it's no charge.
So the reason that is because you live in Bristol. I'm an individual as well, but I live in Moncton and I only have access to the Front Porch Forum post on the towns that touch my town. So I see Ferrisburg, but I don't see Lincoln. So so it's only the towns that touch you that you have access to be posted on.
So Krista's Seringo's the vice chair. Why doesn't she post for the board in Bristol and all 5 towns?
But isn't there also a limit of posts too?
Well, there is if you're using an organizational account, like the school board. There's a limit, so they try to limit businesses and entities from being able to, inundate Front Porch Forum for postings. So we have that conundrum as well. So, what Kristen was doing with our meeting minutes and updates, which have been awesome, is, assigning board members to post it to their respective towns. And that's been working well, provided folks send out exactly what's posted as it's posted without any narrative associated with it. And so we're just in this funny place where we're trying to figure out how to make sure for some of these bigger issues around the facilities plan, how to get messages out to all 5 towns coming from the board in a consistent way.
Kristen has her hand up. Oh, you're still muted.
So we've had posters in each town for the last bit, and part of the communications plan that I just read was that people will develop relationships with their town people. And so, I mean, sometimes when I do that, people will then ask me questions and then, that's someone in your town. So I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but that was part of the communications plan also, is developing relationships. And right, if Patrick's just churning it out, that's not developing relationships. So just that aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, I think people have been doing a great job posting those items.
Krista.
Yeah, and I think that is a really important piece, and it is part of a strategy is to make sure that all board members are communicating with taking turns. But we also were hitting time crunch issues, and I think when we get to these times where we're trying to alert so many people about so many things that in such a short time, that's why we were using it was like, Jennifer, can you blast this everywhere? And it was easy to do that way, but it wasn't coming from a board account. So
we'd have to pay $1,200 to have a board account.
it sounds that way.
And we'd be limited with how many posts you could post. As Patrick said, 4 a month, I think it is.
So what Jennifer was doing more of, and we were trying the approach of having it be really clear that message from the board, or signed by the board chair or something like that. But I understand the optics of it, which I think you raised, Dave. It's just that's the reason why it's been happening that way.
Yeah, I think that it is much better if the message to the community from the board appears to be from the board.
So at the moment, I guess we can just keep going ahead with how we're doing, how Kristen's model of sending it out and having people post it. It's sort of twofold. It gets the information out and then establishes that relationship. So just, I guess, really important that we post what is sent and we do it in a timely manner. So if everybody commits to that, I guess we'll just keep going ahead. And so as far as the communication structure and process, can we table, is there a motion to table that? Is that what I'm hearing?
Move to table that to next month, and I think it would also benefit new members to look at that too and hear our discussion.
Okay.
I'll second.
And Steve seconds. Okay. Krista, are you in favor of tabling it?
Yep. Yes.
Sarah McLean?
Yes.
Okay. Kristen?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Caleb?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Okay, and Sarah LaPearl?
Yes.
And I think Annie we've lost Annie, so that one passes as well. And I have to tell you all that at this hour, that is quite a feat to remember all your names. My eyes are changing the letters. Okay. All right, so that's tabled. All right, the next is update from the Community Engagement Committee. Krista, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and I know it's late, and so I appreciate everyone taking a little bit more time. So I had mentioned to Don and Patrick that I was feeling like not sure when to re-engage our official committee. Obviously, we've continuing to engage folks and figure out ways to embed the community in our decision making, and that's all been great. I'm imagining that through this proposal process, there might be some more. There will be a need for information sharing in a deliberate way, and maybe additional engagement around evaluating different proposals. So I think that would be something for our committee to convene around and make plans for. But something else I think is really important in it, and I think it's something that Rob mentioned earlier. We spent some time last fall really deliberately engaging with key stakeholders and providing opportunities for them to articulate their vision for the future of our district. And that was really important work in a number of levels. And I think it would be really valuable to consider going back and doing that again, particularly students and staff. And there was a smart kid on earlier who articulated the need to talk to students. And I think staff are equally important to reach out to. They're the folks that are really, those two groups are on the ground. They can provide a great sense of what they see their world like right now and what they might envision for the future. And, when we think about looking at proposals and what makes them viable, I think it's really important that we hear from Patrick. I think it's really important that we hear from the DMG. But I think there's also that input from the folks doing the work that we need to get, and that I think that's part of our responsibility. And so I'd like the Community Engagement Committee to have a chance to grapple with some of that and what that might look like. But I'd like to just get feedback from the board on when it makes the most sense to initiate those conversations.
Steve?
I don't know why that couldn't happen as soon as possible.
I think they're fading fast. I'm seeing your eyelids are getting heavy.
I just want to bring something up about what we used to do on the board is always have a chair and a co-chair for committees so that people could, I think it's good to bounce things off of people. So I just might recommend that for the community engagement thing too, also so that Krista might not have so much to do. But I think one thing I've noticed about the new board compared to the old boards, even though they were smaller, or for what we used to have is called the executive committee, is to always make sure there's, two people in case someone's sick or someone whatever. So I would recommend us doing that going forward, even on committees and other things that we're doing.
Is it
Kevin?
not a vice chair on the CEC?
No.
Guess I'd like to hear a little bit more from Steve on as starting back up with the CEC as soon as possible. I get the impression the conversation will be to communicate out or get feedback on the process we're doing, and we seem pretty early in the process. So I'm a little confused as where the right time to jump in might be.
Well, if we're thinking about getting qualifications from people, and I use that term very loosely, if it's really just sort of a brainstorming phase where people are kind of proposing things and then we're sort of vetting those for further development, I don't know why we couldn't hear from the student groups and the teachers groups sort of in that time frame. I would think it'd be appropriate. They're not likely to have a fully vetted financial model with all the bells and whistles, but their input, I would think, would be very helpful in weighing some of the other things that we hear.
And that would all be nurtured through the CEC, I guess.
It could be.
Anyone else? I'm thinking, Krista, we need a little more time to figure out what we're doing before we have another group start figuring out what they're doing. I'm seeing a few nod on that. So can we revisit this at the next one of the next 3 meetings, one of them, wherever it fits in best?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I just want to make sure that we don't leave out the voices of the folks who are most directly impacted by or involved in the work. And, Patrick and his team are a huge part of that. And they provide incredibly valuable information. But I think it's not the whole picture. And I think it's really important that we also hear from students and staff.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Moving along. Legislative update. Dave, do you have a 2-minute update?
Yes, I'll be very quick. So the pension, the biggest deal conversations going on right now is about the pension funds, not just teachers, but also state employees and to some extent municipal employees, hundreds of millions of dollars in arrears, and how to solve that problem. Is not going to be easy or fun. And there's conversations going on in the legislature that probably, my guess, is going to result in employees chipping in more and the education fund chipping in more. Maybe some changes to eligibility for pensions going forward. The other thing is there is bills in motion with regard to the weighting study. Others have expressed the same concern I have about the calculation of poverty. And so that's being looked at. Also, the high spending threshold, there's recognition that, it was really sort of painfully obvious that the increase in the high spending threshold did not mesh with the pressures on budgets. So how to deal with that, eliminating construction costs or eliminating increases in healthcare or just raising the threshold higher. I encourage all of you to be in contact with your legislators. It's amazing how easy it is and how responsive they are. One really key person is Senator Brian Companion out of Bennington, who is the chair of the Senate Education Committee and is the key person with regard to the weighting study. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to mention one other thing. There's lots of training stuff on the VSBA website and webinars. I encourage you to take a look at those and use some of the expertise that's available there.
Thank you. All right. I don't think we're in need of an executive session, correct, Patrick? All right. All right. And so, Chris, if you'll warm up that survey, we're going to get to it, but I'm going to take public comment right now. I think everybody's asleep. Oh, I'm not seeing anyone.
No, we're not.
Oh, there. I'm not. Is that Nancy?
Yep.
Did you want to make a comment?
Nope.
Okay. Kristen Blanchett, do you have your hand? There you go.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's any progress on discussions with other school districts regarding forming study committee to look at mergers. Patrick?
Yeah, so tomorrow night, so the group of people that have been meeting sort of informally as this idea has been kind of advancing through board processes. So Kevin as the chair of the Facilities Feasibility Study Committee, Dawn as chair of the board, and Krista as chair of the community engagement. We've had a couple of meetings with counterparts in Addison Northwest over the last many months. That same group representing MAUSD is going to have another, still more conceptual, but trying to advance the process a bit towards something more formal. Going to have that next level conversation tomorrow night with folks from Addison Northwest. So the hope is from that meeting, some more formal action. So this board has taken formal action to say we want to form a study committee. The Addison Northwest board has not done that. So presumably following this, maybe there's going to be something more actionable in terms of getting that off the ground. So that's the gist of it right now. We hopefully have more to report after that conversation tomorrow night.
And Sarah LaPearl.
I'm just confirming that I didn't miss something for our town meetings. That I'm not involved. I don't have to say a thing.
Nope, we did not take any action because everything was up in the air about how they were going to handle their meetings, so we took no action. So everybody gets a rest this time.
So Bristol went through 37 articles in half an hour last night and one of their 2 informational meetings.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Kristen, is that your hand from before, or you have a new question?
Yeah, again, when we had the board before, and I'm not trying to make meetings longer, if we could just be told about side projects, and I know we have been, but very informally, about you guys meeting with other districts, if we could just hear that every month to say, oh, we're still doing that, like have it on the agenda. I think it's important for all of us to know what's going on in all areas. Just to say, hey, like I remember we used to have a district negotiation committee that I was on, and I would just say, yep, we met again, and if there were any updates, and it was usually really, really quick. But I think it's good for all of us to know all of what's going on, so we're not surprised, or if people tell us about it in the community, we're like, oh, I didn't know that was happening, or I just think that's important.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I
Okay.
agree.
All right. Any public comment from the public? This is your last chance. All right. Moving down to the meeting evaluation.
Ready?
Ready.
All right.
Go.
Is the level of engagement of all board members high or low?
Hi, you're getting thumbs up, 2 thumbs up.
All right. Was the agenda followed? Yes or no?
Yep, thumbs,
Yes.
thumbs, yes.
Any comments?
Any comments?
No one would know. Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Yes or no? Yes. Any comments? No one would know. Other feedback for the chair?
I appreciated how we gave Paul Forlenza the floor outside of public comment for the relevancy of the topic.
Sorry, just getting all that done. Okay. What went well with the meeting?
It was great hearing Hannah and Bella's perspectives.
Yeah, and not that we don't frequently, but I think we had some really good conversation tonight too.
I would agree.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings besides cake?
I'm ready to be back in person.
Next month, let's have 3 meetings.
There you go.
I second that.
That's a wrap.
All right.
I have one other comment. I just think we should all give Chris Pearsall a round of applause for putting these monster meeting minutes together.
Thank you, Chris.
And thank you guys. I really appreciate the way when you all make motions and second you say your names in case I'm not catching the little block lighting up. I really appreciate that. So thanks.
Thank you.
So Don, you had mentioned it before, but we certainly appreciate Sarah McLean's contributions, and we'll miss her.
Go enjoy your Tuesday nights again.
Oh yeah, I'll probably still be here. That's how sad it is. Yeah, thank you all for your work.
And also, I think, with Krista and Kevin in contested seats. I want to not miss an opportunity to thank you for all of your work. I hope to see you back here, but I would regret if we missed the opportunity to thank you if it didn't go your way. So much appreciated. Your leadership on the two committees has been outstanding, and the time you put in outside of these board meetings when we're all together has been very much appreciated.
Yes, I hope your opponent knows what kind of shoes they have to fill.
All right. Okay, so anybody want to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. Andrew.
Andrew, second. Just give me your thumbs up if you're ready to adjourn. Yeah, it passes, Chris. They're ready to go.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.